So I thought it'd be important that I just give you a little bit of an overview of my background. This is kind of where my trajectory has been over the past 20 plus years in terms of engineering education. I started out as someone that does statistical quality control, quality assurance. That's kind of my base work. So I was much more in the statistical side as being an industrial engineer. However, when I first started my academic appointment, I wrote one grant, and it was in engineering education specific to women in engineering education. Got that one. Wrote another grant to the NSF. Got that one, and it was in engineering education. So I kind of was like this kind of teeter-totter of I got 2 grants in engineering education, or I could struggle working in the area of statistical assurance, and decided, okay, I'll go down this path. It has served me right, but just so that you kind of get an idea of where I've come from. So a lot of my work, particularly since I was predominantly more statistical in nature, I kind of focus most of my work in the area of assessment. In engineering, it's kind of the overlap between the technical skills and the professional skills. My early work was all around freshman attitudes, and so really kind of looking at the pipeline issues. And then I started branching out more in looking at the technical skills, had some work done in how we integrate knowledge for problem solving, which then led into some of my modeling work that I have kind of closed up. And then more recently, I've been working in the area of design, innovation, and entrepreneurship. They say that you should, as a faculty member, kind of reinvent yourself every 5 years, and so this is kind of how my research work really has done some of the trajectory in that work. I've also worked in professional skills and the assessment of that. Ethical reasoning, this is really hard to assess. Teamwork issues, and more or less working on how do we assess that process, not necessarily the outcome, because it is a process measure, as well as how Mark and I actually have connected quite a bit is more in the area of global competency. And I just finished up some work in that area. I've also worked a lot in the area in some curricular innovations, particularly in flipping the classroom. At University of Pittsburgh, we have now in our Swanson School of Engineering, we have about 15 classes, all core undergraduate classes that are flipped. And really seeing some nice, interesting things that have come out of that. I've also done a lot of work in modeling eliciting activities, which actually has groundwork in mathematics education, and we kind of took it up a level working with our colleagues on a large grant with several colleagues from across the country, but predominantly some of the work that Purdue had started in this area and taking it to upper levels of engineering students. Some of my fun work has really been more on landscape analysis, as that's what I call it, for lack of a better word, but really doing cross-institutional studies with freshman attitudes in engineering, entrepreneurship, and then my last one has been in global competency, which Michigan State University was one of our participants. So to just give you a little bit of background of where I've been. I am kind of, I'll be honest, now that I'm Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, I'm kind of moving out and kind of closing some of my research, predominantly just because it's an administrative position. So it's like I was kind of a researcher for 20 plus years, and now I am on the dark side of higher education. But I made a deal with my dean. I'd started the Engineering Education Research Center in 2011 with a gift from our provost. She was so happy that 2 years later she started a sister education center in our discipline-based sciences, and now we're working towards helping the business school create their own. This is in addition to our University Teaching and Learning Center, so we're all working together to kind of improve education. Part of making the deal with my dean is he still wanted me to stay on as director, so I'm kind of doing 2 jobs at once. And as part of that director, I'm trying to work with our faculty for them to pursue their own research in engineering education. This gives you just a quick plug of what my center is. It really is, there's actually 4 people that work with me. I'm really smart in that I have a director for assessment, director for professional development. However, one of them is very steeped in quantitative background. That's Renee. And Irene, who comes from Purdue University, is fantastic when it comes to qualitative research. So I've got both sides of the house covered to work with our faculty. And then Julie and now April are both working on training our next generation faculty members. So I know you have a CERTL group here at Michigan State. We also have one at University of Pittsburgh. All right. Just so that you know, also this spring we're doing something a little bit, we're kind of moving away from pedagogy, and that we're really trying to dive into advising and mentoring of our faculty, having them become much more steep in advising practices, what's evidence-based practices that work, as well as how to be better mentors for undergraduate research as well as graduate research. So we've launched a whole series of things to working with our faculty on that. Okay, so enough about that. I want to talk to you about Gen Z and STEM today. So this is a little bit of a departure from my typical research talks. It's going to be talk more about, what our students are really about and coming in. This is actually a keynote that I had given to a conference in Colorado last summer. I did a little bit more reading about it because I've got some personal vested interest in this on multiple sides. And so I really want to share it. And I just had another group said, hey, I heard you did a great job with this. Will you come and talk to us a little bit about this? So anyway, this is what I have. Please interrupt. I know that's okay. Well, first of all, can everybody hear me fine? Okay. I know we've got a microphone, but I think it's only for the camera purposes. So if I'm not loud enough, yell at me, okay? All right, so framework for this talk is, should we change how we teach? And the answer that you all know here, because I'm talking to the choir, is yes, we should all be changing and improving upon how we teach. But there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of add to all of this is, typically we look to see what are others doing, what are the trends out there that are happening. So a big trend a couple of years ago was flipping the classroom. Right before that was the MOOCs. So we're always kind of seeing what the trends are associated with it. And then we try to think about, and I put it in here in terms of engineering learning because I'm engineering centric, is how do we put it in our own context, our own curricular space. So if you're in chemistry, you're putting it in your own context in your curricular space. So we kind of look to see what are those research-based practices, what are the changing needs of our students, okay? And we also try to see where also industry is kind of wanting to see us as well. So we kind of have it from multiple perspectives about how and why we should change the way we teach. Okay, so here's my formula. This is my only formula that I'm going to provide in this presentation today, okay? We're going to look at content and context, okay? Which here really is the only thing that's going to differ. Me being engineering centric, I have people that are in chemistry and biology here and stuff. So that's really the only thing that might change per se. The pedagogy, who we are teaching, our students, and then what I call the special sauce, okay? And that will produce learning, we think. Now, I want to put a little content and context associated with this, and this is where it'll be engineering centric here. A number of years ago, I worked with Leah Jamison, who has just recently stepped down as dean at Purdue, as well as Jack Lohman, who has retired from Georgia Tech, and he was vice provost there. Where we worked on, we had a grant from the ASEE looking at engineering culture, and we sent out, here's one of my cross-institutional surveys, we sent out a report that we had done that was based on evidence-based teaching practices, and we really wanted to get a flavor for not just going to American Society of Engineering Education where we're talking to the choir again, but we really wanted to go into the departments and see what they thought, okay? We had about 156 engineering schools. That was both a random sample and a focus sample. And we asked the faculty what are the most compelling parts of this report that we have produced for them, what would be their top 3 priorities, their principal opportunities, challenges, and then we kind of had this quantitative checkbox. We do this, we don't do this, and so on, okay? We also then, given that the departments filled this out, it then went up to the level of their chairs, who also were able to comment on it. And then within each of the engineering schools that we sampled and asked to participate, we usually pick 2 departments within that institution. So you might have had something like industrial engineering and bioengineering that both produced it. And so then their comments, after their chairs did, looked at it, reviewed it, went up and rolled up to their dean to comment further. So we had a 46% response rate, so we actually did pretty good. There was, given the nature of what we were asking them to do, it was quite a bit. Here's where we came, okay, in terms of what our educational environments were really engaged in. Research, we think it's really important, we value it, and the degree to which we practice it, okay? So engineering departments say, undergraduate research, yep, we do it, and we do it really well. Laboratories, yep, we do it. Hands-on learning, yep, we do it, and we do it really well, okay? Co-op and internships, yep, we're doing it, and we're doing it really well. There were no surprises here for us. What we were really interested in were these bottom ones, were the international programs, entrepreneurship programs, and service learning programs. It was kind of hovering on importance, or how it was valued, and certainly it was not really practiced, okay? Now, why am I focusing on that is because these are things that are really going to be critical for the students that are coming into college now. Okay, also, I'm using this as, for pedagogy, I'm kind of using this as my continuum for what we want to think. You know, are we looking at being instructor-centered versus student-centered? You know, are we working on trying to make the lecture more active? Or are we fully engaged in that we're doing problem-based learning and the problems are driving the class? Okay, so this is kind of the spectrum by which I'm kind of looking at things. Now, let's talk about our students, Gen Z, okay? These are the new students. Your millennials are graduating, okay? And this is a new generation of students that have some unique characteristics that are different than our current generation. Here is your typical Gen Z student. This is my son. He's a freshman in high school now. I'll be lucky if I don't kill him before he's a senior in high school. So this is who we're teaching. Here's what he really looks like, okay? And he's out in front of the Pitt Panther. He's a hockey boy, plays on 2 hockey teams, and school's okay for him. And then this is my daughter. She is a senior graduating, and she is going into music therapy, and I have about 8 auditions that I'm flying her to around the country and getting into music therapy programs. Pretty intensive at the undergrad level, so it's been, fortunately, we're already accepted into 2, so it's all kind of downhill, but at the same time, it's very nerve-wracking. It's actually harder to get into music school than it is to get into any STEM-related discipline, in my opinion. All right, so you see my kids. These are Gen Z kids, all right? They grew up post 9/11, okay, during the 2008 recession, okay? They are risk-averse, interestingly, and they're very concerned about their financial future, okay? I never thought about this with my kids, being risk-averse. But then after I had kind of started reading more and more about it, I'm like, okay, some things are clicking here. Not so much with what they were saying to me, but what their friends are saying to me. They're most ethnically and racially diverse generation in the United States history, and you probably have all read and seen and understand what's going on. They're raised by Gen Xers, okay? I'm a baby boomer, I'm the last of the baby boomers, so mine are a little bit different in that regard. But they're actually compared to the silent generation. They're compared to their grandparents, they're compared to my parents' generation, the ones that were the post-World War II generation, okay? Very conservative background. You know, they're post-depression, they lived through wars in their families, and so on. So this is where they're being modeled after it, okay? Here's some other things. They're core traits. They're risk averse, I mentioned that. They're mature and in control. I'm not so sure about my son, but they want to make a difference, okay? They're entrepreneurial in nature, okay? I saw this in my daughter when she was in 5th grade. They're mindful about their future. They're collaborative. They're social, okay? They're also concerned with their privacy, okay? So these are really positive traits. They also were born with the phone in their hand, okay? So all these positive traits, first of all, who's got kids about this age group? All right. You all are understanding my perspective in that they have the phone 100% of the time. We've had rules. My kids are not allowed to have the phones in their bedrooms. It gets charged in the kitchen every night. But they are very much glued to the phone. Okay, so when we go back and we look at some of these things, you know, the social concern with privacy, and I think of, all right, I took my kids off of social media from the point at which they were in 8th grade till the point at which my daughter now is a senior, and I let her have social media back. You know, it's like, privacy? What privacy are you really talking about here? So I'm not going to make this a discussion about all the bad things about our students that are coming in that are digital natives, if you will. I'm going to try to highlight some of the positive things and how we can use this towards the learning that they're doing. Okay, so early last summer, I read Generation Z Goes to College. This is the group that's coming in. So you already, technically, your students that are coming in, they're sophomores now is kind of the beginning. So there's that overlap between the millennials and the X-Geners. What they had done is conducted a survey in the fall of 2014. They looked at characteristics, styles, motivations, how they learn, how they engage, and how they communicate with others, okay? They also looked at the pertinent social issues that are important to these students, okay? They had about 15 institutions, and they had about 1,100 students that were born after 95, okay? So here are the different measurement and response items that came out of it. I'm going to focus on their characteristics, their styles for working with others, their motivations, their learning styles, and their social concerns, okay? So, personality. They are not a like me generation. Millennials were all about me. Your X-Geners are about everybody that's inclusive, as a general rule, okay? They're compassionate, thoughtful, open-minded. They are very responsible when it comes to money, okay? And it's noted that education must be fundable, okay? And we're seeing that now today, which is actually something for the STEM areas, is they want to do their education such that they know that they can get a job. Okay, this is a group of students that is very mindful about this. They're determined and they have a lot of interactivity. What's interesting is in past generations, people got out and got moving. This is a sedentary group, okay? They sit, they're on their phones, they're on their computers, yet they are very physical. So they do physical activity in spurts, but in general, they're sedentary, okay? They recognize the we-centricness of how they should be operating in the world, okay? And they also recognize that the social issues are not easy issues to solve, but they want to be part of those solutions. They're motivators. They're quite, when I said that, you know, they're loyal, they don't like to disappoint anyone, okay? So these are positives. They're not always associated with monetary rewards. Okay, men, and this part isn't really overly surprising, men want to leave a legacy, Women want to make a difference, okay? Unmotivators are recognition, okay? Acceptance or a payback. Money is not a motivator. Now, with that said, they are very conscientious. They are worried about security, but not necessarily out to make the best buck that they possibly can, okay? So they want to love what they do and be secure in it. Employment. Employment is a job means survival, okay? Jobs are hard to find, and that is the reason I'm going to college. So they're very much motivated, again, on if I go to school, this is why I'm going to get a degree and I'm going to get a job, okay? And they also believe, and this is part of the we-centric, they think everybody should have the ability to be employed, okay? So this is your new cohort of students coming in. So my conjecture is this is a great group of students that naturally fall into STEM education, okay? And they will be good engineers and scientists of tomorrow. We just need to make sure we have that special sauce, and that special sauce is the motivation and the competence. All right, so Susan Ambrose, I'm sure most of you, all of you have either seen or read How Learning Works. We make it basically a Bible for our CERTL participants. You must read this. This is your first book of your book clubs. And part of it, the 7 strategies, is the student's motivation determines, directs, and sustains how they're going to learn. And this is going to be really important for our ex-geners coming in. So they need to see that the environment is supportive to their needs, okay? And they also need to have some sense of efficacy. What is it in there for me to make things a difference for myself? This is going to be key, for, I believe, more so than before. Okay, the other piece of this is the competence piece, okay? And knowing that they are autonomous in being able to do their work, okay? Which this is going to be a tricky one, and I'll explain in a couple of slides. Purpose and community are also extremely important in what they're going to be doing. So, examples I'm going to provide. I kind of had my framework here ahead of time. Is I want to talk about a little bit of trends that I'm seeing based on what I've read thus far, what is going to be here to stay, and some things about how we might want to rethink what we do. So kind of the trends, I want to focus in on international programs, entrepreneurship, and service learning. And in terms of rethinking how we do, then I'll kind of focus more on kind of that learning continuum, just kind of give you an idea of where I'm going with this. All right, so the reason I'm kind of putting this up, this literally popped out yesterday, is this is a recent report by, well, it's recent, I got it yesterday, by the ASAA on the impact of the maker movement, okay, and what's going on. And it's centric to engineering, but of course it kind of goes across campus. So innovation and entrepreneurship, I believe, is here to stay. It's not going to be a fad, okay, and I know MSU is doing tons of stuff in terms of maker movement, and I've kind of already kind of been on the website, kind of checking out what you all are doing. It's going to be here. It's not a fad, okay? In terms of curricular, we're going to need to teach more of our students design thinking practices. Our students are coming in asking to learn a little bit more about how do I run a business? Okay, how do I do this? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go over to the business school and get an MBA or a second degree in business, but they want to have some basic fundamentals added to the curriculum that teaches them how that they can survive on their own in the real world, okay? They're also highly interested in social entrepreneurship. So it's not just a measure of, I want to be able to run my own business. It's like, how do I do this in the community? Okay. In terms of co-curricular, we still need to add more types of maker spaces, competitions, hackathons, as well as this kind of helps to cross-pollinate across different disciplines. Okay, so We have, you know, the sciences, engineering get together often. No big deal in terms of hackathons. But they also want to start bringing in other parts of the campus as well. Now, why I put this down first is it really is a function of the motivations that have come out from the Gen Zs. So here are the statistics. They are extremely concerned about finances, but their passion is also important. So again, you have conservative students that are coming in, okay? They know that self-employment rate is growing. 50% of these students believe that they're going to be their own bosses at some point. And that's not a naive. It's not like, ooh, I'm going to start my own company and become rich and famous. That's not where it's coming from. They actually think that they will have to be their own bosses, okay, in order to make ends meet, okay? 2/3 want to make that positive impact. So again, the reason for the social entrepreneurship. 40%, and this might be a little altruistic, but 40% say they want to make an impact and change something in the world, okay? Yeah, it's altruistic, but given where they're coming from. And Northeastern indicated a couple of years ago that 66% think that we, us collectively, should be teaching them those skills, okay? Now, here's another thing, is IQs have gone up, but Bronson and Merriman indicated that the creativity quotient has actually decreased since 1990. And some of this has to do with kind of political environments of our K-12 systems, where we're losing art programs, we're losing music programs, and I mean, it's across the nation. But students are coming into college with less opportunities of these creative avenues coming to college. And so they're thirsting for it once they get to college. So they want to be taught creativities, and employers are also wanting them to be creative thinkers. Now, an interesting thing, I put this here. A couple of years ago, University of Pittsburgh we got a new chancellor. He's very much into innovation and creativity across the campus. And over the past 5 years, we literally have maker spaces all over campus. So it's not engineering specific, it's across the board. And we have an innovation institute that tries to draw across the campus. So very similar to what you all are doing here. One of the things that we did about 7 years ago is on one of our floors in our building, we actually put in a music studio for our students. And we teach a 1-credit music engineering class. The whole purpose of the class is for students to actually learn how to use the equipment so that it's their own recording studio and they can go in, they know how to take care of all the equipment, they know how to use the equipment and so on. And then once they've taken that class, they can card swipe in there and they can go in and use it 24/7, okay? We put that in there because our faculty said if you want creative engineers, you need to have a music studio, you need to have this, you need to have that. So we did it. Our dean was like, why am I buying a $25,000 Steinway for this room? Okay. However, as soon as we put it in, it's used all the time. Okay. It's also a really nice show-off piece when I have guests that come in. We learned after we did this, 1/3 of our pit marching band are engineering students. 1/3. I mean, if you can imagine, and we were talking about at breakfast, that how much music is connected and can connect the synapses in the brain, and that there's so much science involved in music that it should be a natural thing that we have. So we've put it in, students love it. I had one kid take the class and he didn't know how to play anything or do anything, couldn't sing. All he could do was snap his fingers, but he wanted to learn how to do this and start creating things on his own. Okay, service learning, all right? This is going to be a new trend. It's been there all along, but I think students will want to call it social change and not service learning. So again, this is where that social entrepreneurship comes into play. We need to start, and I hate saying this, but in the sciences and engineering, we also need to start teaching them a little bit on financial literacy to help make that connection to that social change, okay? In terms of co-curricular, maybe start looking at some study abroad, spring breaks as being stay abroad learning opportunities where you send a group of students to communities to kind of help make improvements to the situation. At the same time, students really want to do service learning. It has to be profitable. So the students are looking to make things more profitable and wanting to create microfinancing type of opportunities. Why is this important? Okay, 65% of millennials volunteered. Okay, and I can tell you the reason they volunteer, and this is part of the study, is it made them feel good. Okay, it gave them their pat on the back. I did my service learning opportunities. Okay, only 33% of the Gen Zs plan to volunteer. Now this is kind of interesting. It's a little bit of a dichotomy at first. However, here's the reason why they plan to volunteer, is they have been voluntold, not volunteered. 90% have done community service in high school, and of those, it was required. Half of it was required, okay? My daughter is a perfect example. My kids, it is a service requirement. Their junior year, they must go and volunteer 12 hours, okay? Okay, it's good, it gets them out, but it's very much of a millennial thing to be told to go and do their volunteer work. What it ended up happening is my daughter says, I'm not doing that. I'm going to carefully pick what I'm going to do, and I'm going to stick with it. Awesome. I didn't realize that, kind of there's these possible connections after I started reading the research results, that my kid was actually protesting the state requirement. She ended up working for a Humane Society for Wild Animals. She actually worked there for 9 months. She only had to do 2 days, okay? So again, I'm using my daughter as an example, but the Gen Z don't want to be voluntold. They want to pick what they need to do and work on it, okay? They want to make those decisions. They're interested in more sustainable and long-term social change, okay? They want to solve the problems, okay? Again, this is perfect grounds for science and engineering education. They're financially conservative, yes. But here's another reason why we need to teach them financial literacy, is they do not have that literacy now. Okay, so part of some of what we do really should be woven into our curriculums or co-curricular activities. International, just keep increasing the opportunities, okay? In terms of curricular, try to create opportunities that can be curricular. So one of the things that we do, I know I'm going to meet with Marianne Walker this afternoon. I've known her for several years, has a really vibrant program for international programs, very cool. What we've done at Pitt is we've created, technical electives where students might be studying renewable energy. We pick 2 countries, the United States, and then we pick Brazil. And so we kind of look at the dichotomy of the renewable energy. And then at the end of the term, we go down to Brazil for 10 days and really kind of go to Foz do Iguaçu, get a full plant tour, also get soaked in the falls. We go to Sao Paulo, which has the 4th largest grid in the world. And we were actually able to go in the control room and see how they kind of run that show. They have their own police force where they can get, if something goes down, they can get to it faster than anybody else in the city. So we've kind of created courses where we kind of build that into the curriculum. In terms of co-curricular, Michigan State and Georgia Tech have phenomenal internships that are international internships. So, the students might be studying in a particular say, biological sciences, and then the internships have been built around international opportunities. University of Rhode Island does kind of a full court press with their students, where they have, the students are doing their curriculum. There's a study abroad component, but there's a language component, and then there's their curricular component. So by the end of and then there's an internship component. So by the end time that they're ready to graduate, these people can speak another language, they've worked in another country, and they've also are very steep in their particular STEM area. University of Cincinnati does international co-ops, which is kind of a neat thing that they've kind of turned into it. For motivations for our Gen Zs, it's all about the experiential learning. We know this as faculty, that experiential learning is a really good thing, okay? But for them, it's necessary. They have very much an open-mindedness towards diversity, okay? A third of these students are coming in already knowing they want to do some sort of study abroad opportunity. That's really cool. When you think about it, many of these students really did not know this ahead of time in the past. And half of them want to live abroad. So you have students that are coming to college that already have this mindset of, I want to get out in the world, okay? The problem is international is expensive, okay? Which is why I kind of put up some of these opportunities, is that there are financial mechanisms, particularly with the co-op and the international internships, that make it viable for our students to do this across the board. Actually, these are some of our students who had studied in Florence. I put this up. This is Anne Robertson. She and her husband, who happens to be from Italy, take about 30 students over to Florence for 1 month. They take 2 classes, and they study engineering of the Renaissance. So this is a phenomenal program, but it's done in a Maymester, so students can still go out and do co-op, or they can come back to school in the summer and do a whole bunch of different opportunities. So it's just kind of an idea. Okay, research and internships. Again, keep increasing the opportunities. One of the things the study has found is there's a real need for research literacy. Again, this is something that's grounded in our STEM education, but as the digital age has actually hurt them in knowing how to access information. And we were talking earlier this morning about, just students don't know how to take notes. Students don't know how to read textbooks anymore. So really trying to access the information, it's all there, but they don't know how to navigate it, okay? So 80% want educational programs that actually will integrate more of these practical experiences as well as the internships, okay? One of the things, my daughter going into music therapy, she was actually very worried about going into music therapy because she was like, is it going to be a viable job for me when I graduate? I'm like looking at her, I'm like, where did you grow up so fast? And because half of her friends are either going into accounting because that's safe, and I'm not joking, engineering because it's safe. I'm like, this is the kid that has no issue spending my money, but yet she's, very worried about this. And I said, okay, well, let's look at these. When she's interviewing these people, I'm like, do you have internships as part of this? And, it's like, dang, it's like, this is not my kid. I was kind of excited, but then, I started reading about some of this, and like, somebody's been planting this, or she's been in this culturated environment where she's learned about, how the recession has impacted so many of her, maybe not her personal family, but through the social media, she's learned that people that are maybe not just like her, but have families who have struggled. And so that's one of the aspects of what the social media has done. They're all coming to college to get a job. They crave solving problems. Okay, and this is documented research that has come out. Okay, so some things on what we need to rethink how we do. Okay, At this point, everybody has probably come across Freeman's article, okay, which, you know, demonstrates across multiple meta-studies that active learning really does work, okay? This is great. It's been wonderful for us in our own engineering school. I no longer have faculty poo-pooing, you know, doing straight lecture. Now, don't get me wrong. I've known many faculty that are phenomenal lecturers, and they can do it, okay? I've also known many faculty that do phenomenal in problem-based learning classes. So I think there's kind of these it's not just all about doing one or doing the other. There's a lot of factors involved in creating the best learning environment for your students, okay? But with this, I kind of wanted to think about who we're teaching, okay? So I'm kind of going back to the equation of looking at the middle variable there, and that our students coming in, okay, have each created their own zone for learning, okay? And this is different than what you've seen in the past, okay? And that they're actually isolated learners, more so than what you've seen in the past. And that they get all the resources they think help them learn, and then they go off and learn, okay? They love interpersonal learning, okay, but they also want to collaborate. The problem is they don't know how to, okay? Or how they collaborate is radically different than what we're used to doing, okay? Practice makes perfect, okay? We all know that. They love logic-based approaches. They're very much cookbook kids, okay? And I'm sure you've seen it, okay? Give me the formula, show me the process, and I'll keep doing it until I've learned how to do it. They also do a lot of just-in-time learning on their own. And this is kind of some of the problems that we have. Now, more so than ever, they're very much into assignment binging, okay? And you've seen this in your own students. They wait till, you know, homework's due on Tuesday, they're working on it Monday, okay? It's more so now with this group of students than you've seen in the past. So with the web, we've created a beautiful situation where there's so much information that it's allowed people to procrastinate. It kind of rolls up to their zone for learning. They will be procrastinators because they're used to having their resources, and then they use those resources and only those resources to study or to learn from, okay? Which may or may not be the resources you're giving them in class. So, multitasking, no, okay? There is no such thing as multitasking, okay? Short attention, yes, okay? The internet accessibility has increased over the past 10 years. However, the average attention has decreased in half, okay, just in the past 10 years. They have documented and that the brains of students that are coming into college today look radically different than the students that went to college in the 80s. Now, given these two things, here's something I used to always use with my faculty. And that in WineCat, so this is 2002, it was also documented in 78, that a student's attention span during a traditional lecture really is only at 10 to 15 minutes max, okay? And from that point on, you've lost them, okay? Well, if you take into account, given that WineCats is 20 years old, okay, if you take into account that the internet accessibility has changed it, according to this, then it would say that we've actually even cut that further in half. So I might even have someone for only 8 minutes, 7 minutes. And so I need to think about how that impacts how I'm actually going to teach my students. So if we're thinking about active learning, and we go to Mickey Chi's work, okay, we have active activities, okay, where they're actually doing something physical, okay, so your lab works are excellent for that. I don't foresee there being issues there. We have constructive activities that require students to produce new outputs, okay? So this is creating, building, okay? This is good. This should go and move beyond that 7 minutes, 8 minutes. And then we have interactive activities that require students actually have dialogues with each other and discuss and integrate their contributions. This is where I think we're going to need to have the most work done, because based on some of the research that I've done through the survey and through some of the other sources, is that the teaming and group work is going to suffer even more. Okay? They like to work independently, but in a collaborative environment. Okay? So imagine, if you will, those of you that have children and you've transported them and they're in the back of the seat of the car, they're all on their phones and they're conversing with each other. The car is silent. Now, take that up a notch, and that's also how they're doing their work, is they could be sitting together in front of their computers, they're all working on the same Google Doc, and they're not saying one word to each other. They're working collaboratively, but are they really exchanging idea? Okay? So, kind of looking at some of these. Traditional lecture followed by discussion. Our students can't discuss, okay? They don't know how. So this is where kind of that active learning and the simple think, pair, share is even more important today than it has been in the past. It used to be a nice thing that we did. It got them involved. It got them to think about, talk about some of their things in a non-hostile environment where they could just ask one person what they thought, and if they were right or wrong, that was good, and then they had a little bit more confidence to say, hey, I think I know the answer. Now we need to do that because they don't know how to have conversations, okay? They're starting to move into this realm of not having conversations. When we look at informal group activities, structured team activities, starting to move into that more collaborative and cooperative learning environment, here's the thing, is collaboration with Gen Z is different. Like I said, they could work independently right next to each other on a Google Doc, okay? What millennials would do is they take the project and say, okay, you do A, you do B, I'll do C, okay? Your Gen Zs will work together, they just won't talk to each other, okay? So, some suggestions that I've been looking at some other research to indicate, though this isn't really evidence-based yet, is definitely creating the time for groups to meet together. Separate the group project assignment equally and have them work on it independently, okay? Then bringing them together and putting them into a group, okay? So after the draft, they kind of create new roles for themselves on what they're going to do. So you have copy editor, weaver, citation checker. This allows them to have that autonomy and independence, but it also allows them to start building accountability across the group where they might not have had it before. Okay, just-in-time learning. Students lack integration and concept of time. Okay, when I meant the procrastinators in learning, more so than ever because they've always had all this information. They don't want us dispensing the information. They can get the information. If I pull up thermodynamics, I will get 7 pages of references for learning thermodynamics, of which the first 2 pages aren't too bad, okay? So, do they need the book? One thing as a faculty member, I even tell them first day one, please do not ask me if you need to buy the book, okay? Just don't ask me that question. But they do have a problem. They cannot integrate information, okay? And they need us to help them kind of do that knowledge integration and show them how to solve the real problems. They want to do all of this, they can't figure it out, okay? They want us to help facilitate their learning. And interestingly, this generation really likes us, okay? Millennials wanted nothing to do with adults. This generation really enjoys being around mentors and having mentorship relationships. This is kind of a cool thing if you think about it. This is a positive, all right? They also want us 24/7, okay? So they have, like I said, they have no concept of time. Students right now are much more, they lack the sense that if they send an email or a text message to you at 10 o'clock at night, they're expecting that you're going to respond to them at 10 o'clock at night, because they're in a generation where they have that instant gratification from their peers, and they do expect it. So kind of setting some nice ground rules to make them understand that. Okay, I'm not going to go too much. The flipping and hybrid learning is not going to be a fad. It is also here to stay. The reason is they are craving the engaged learning with the instructor. You know, beforehand we had direct teaching, and then you send them off to do engaged learning, the homework, the projects, and so on. Okay, they don't want this. They want this. Okay, and even more so, they really are craving being able to have that resource. Like I said, they get in their own zone of, these are the pieces of resources that I'm going to learn from, and then they go off and they learn on their own. You want them to have your resources for learning. Yes, you appreciate when they get their own, but they want your resources for learning. And so they want them to be very dispensable. So the nice thing about the hybrid learning that people are doing in the flip learning is those resources become available to them 24/7. Okay, lastly, I think this is my lastly, is the socially conscious curriculum. In terms of pedagogy, and I think we can speak across, well, I'll be honest, some of the science I think is already socially conscious. Engineering, I think we lack some socially conscious curriculum. And that it doesn't speak always to all the environments that we can solve problems in. It also is in engineering, and I can say this because I'm a woman, I think a lot of our engineering curriculum is still very male-based. And we need to kind of change that to make it more socially conscious. We need to learn a little bit more on inclusive teaching practices, so the pedagogy itself. But even if you don't do that, just revising homework such that the problems that you're giving are in an environment that is much more socially in a socially conscious set. So this kind of goes back to the active learning and the instructor center. Why is this important? Racial equality is very important to Gen Zers. They believe equality is the right thing to do. Racism terrible. Why is racism still around? Okay. These are all very altruistic, okay? And we know that it's very important elsewhere. 68% care about it, and interesting, 40% of the group that was surveyed was white. So this is predominant. It's not just based on who was surveyed. So, in going back to what my original formula is about, I really believe that Gen Z is very primed to be our next generation science and engineers. I also believe, though, that we need to figure out what their weaknesses are and minimize them. It's not necessarily something that we need to overhaul our systems of teaching, but also to take into account some of these nuances that this next generation is bringing to the table. They are a different group than the group that you've had, the millennials, and figure out what those strengths really are. So with that, I say thank you.